Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 86. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and I am so excited to finally launch the Ally Conversation series here on the podcast. And I know I teed it up a bit when I shared in episode number 83, Dear White Men, what we were doing. And I provided a few tips to white men who want to be allies. But now we get to start the process of actually interviewing leaders in affinity groups across the country. So we are starting with the National Bar Association and their new president, Joe Drayton. Joe is a partner at Cooley, and he has won many awards. He received the New York City Bar Association Diversity and Inclusion Champion Award in 2014. He was named by Savoy Magazine as one of the most influential Black lawyers. And he has many other awards and accolades to his name. Today, though, we're going to be talking about his role as the president of the National Bar Association. And I am honored to have him as the very first guest on our Ally Conversation series. So let's get to the conversation. Joe, welcome to Hustle and Flow.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. So you are going to be our first guest in this Ally Conversation series. And so we just really appreciate you being willing to come on and just have this conversation so that we can have a dialogue.
My pleasure again.
All right. So tell us about the National Bar Association. You would think that as lawyers, we know all of the affinity groups, we know all of the associations, but I have found that a lot of people don't. So in your own words, kind of just give us some background, some history about the National Bar Association, why it was formed, and who it's intended to serve.
Well, the National Bar Association was founded in 1924, and it was founded at a time where African-American attorneys were not readily welcome into the American Bar Association. And so it was incorporated in 1925, and we have our roots stemming from Iowa, but there were several Black lawyers from across the country that sort of came together to form the Bar Association. So, we have the same mission as other bar associations in the sense that we've come together to facilitate, lawyers being the best they could be in the profession of law at its basic level. Our founding, obviously, in 1925, there were several challenges to African-American lawyers being at their best and getting opportunities in the profession. And then our community struggled with several issues in the civil rights arena, given Jim Crow and other significant issues of divide in the United States at that time. And so the National Bar Association, its members, were at the forefront of issues in civil rights naturally. They're just a part of the community with which they lived. And obviously that became a part of the DNA of the National Bar Association for that reason. I will also say, our mission also includes the development and pipeline of young lawyers, being there to see that justice is administered in the right way with respect to our communities. And also, we are supportive of the rule of law as an organization, and we drill down on the science of jurisprudence. So we have a multidimensional mission, but at the end of the day, we want to see our lawyers exceed and be able to practice all facets of law.
So, that's a great point in that it is still needed. I appreciate the conversation around the American Bar Association did not welcome in African American attorneys at the time. Now, obviously, the ABA, they've got diversity commissions and they're trying to, be more inclusive. But there's some conversation around, do we even need all of these affinity groups if the ABA and others are now more inclusive? I think we need them, but I would like to hear your perspective on that.
Well, the answer is a resounding yes. So let me just start with that these types of organizations are still needed. There's still a big gap between the majority lawyer and the diverse lawyer, being that lawyer African American or otherwise. The same way there's a gap in gender, there's a diversity gap. And that gap hasn't been bridged. And it's going to take quite some time for that to occur. So the affinity bars are still mission critical to a diversity and inclusion in the legal profession and in the workplace in general. I'll share with you that as a lawyer coming up, I asked myself that same question. And when we dealt with the recession, I guess between the years of 2000, late 2008, 2011 or so, it became apparent because diverse lawyers were being disproportionately, let go in the law firm space and otherwise. And so it's definitely clear that there was much more work to do. And part of it goes back to when you sort of face the same experiences and overcome the same obstacles in the profession and in various workplace settings. You need to have organizations like the National Bar Association, other affinity bars to give you access to lawyers, be it your business model. If you're a law firm lawyer, you may need access to lawyers who work in corporate America. You may need to learn how to leverage innate skill sets that you have to your benefit and be proud to distinguish yourself amongst your colleagues for unique talents that you have. There's definitely various ways affinity bars can help in the development of diverse lawyers, given that many diverse lawyers do not work in environments that reflect the community. So there is a gap there, and lawyers need to understand how to bridge that gap. And we compete at the highest of levels. So it's not as though, when our lawyers in court, they're great lawyers in the courtroom all the time. When you work in large law firm environments, it's very competitive. So you need to be at your best. And I think affinity bar is just one piece of an overall support system to help our lawyers be at their best.
Well, and let's talk about some of those numbers. I mean, it's generally changing, but I know the MCCA, they had, I think the report last year said that of law firms, only 9% are attorneys of color. Only 3% are African American. And that's worse for Black women. I think we know that, right? There was the wonderful ABA article on Invisible Then Gone. It's even worse. And then the Washington Post, they reported that Black lawyers were more likely to leave law firms than any other minority. And I think it was within the last 2 years, this one kind of came out from Null, they were saying that for the first time, African Americans or associates were being hired at a lower amount than basically 15 years prior. So, I mean, these numbers should be alarming for us, even though, as you were talking about in the community, it's not reflective. And we have a third of the profession is actually minorities. But at the top, and with GCs, it's only 11%. So clearly there's this gap. We've been working on this for a long time. The NBA, right? You guys have been working on this, like you said, since the 20s. Where do you really see the biggest problem? I mean, where we have these affinity groups, we are talking about these issues, and yet you don't really seem to be making that much progress, if we're being honest. Where do you see the main issues, where are the sticking points where we're talking about things, but nothing's really changing?
Well, let me say this. It is a tough problem. There are sticking points. I do believe the institutions are diversifying their organizations, be it law firms, be it corporations, be it public interest groups, be it the state, local, and federal governments, all making real attempts to diversify their workforces. Now, I will say this, the numbers are the numbers, right? And they're reflective of the reality. So I won't discount that at all. But what I will say is that So we don't discount the numbers, but time. So we're about 50 years removed from the civil rights movement. And so we're in our infancy stages around diversity and inclusion work. And just over the 20 years I've been in the profession, I have seen drastic improvements in approaches to diversity and inclusion, a difference in the folks that champion diversity and inclusion. And I have seen CEOs, even at my own firm, and I'm at a MLR 50 firm, who make diversity a priority. And that's an evolving process, and it's a positive trend. So I do think we will see better results over time. I think we've taken some hits with respect to some of the Supreme Court decisions and to the approaches in law schools with how they select students and in the pipeline into the legal profession. But I think we'll overcome those hits and are overcoming those hits. But I think time is on our side. And I think when we have more time and we move from the infancy stages to the crawl stage, to the walk stage, you're going to see exponential progress, I think, over the next 50 years as compared to the first 50 years. So I'm not necessarily advocating patience, but it just takes time with the efforts to get results. And there are efforts, they need to be ramped up, but I think time is sort of on our side. And I think the efforts are increasingly getting better, at least from my vantage point.
This is why you are a great leader. I'm super impatient, but I like taking the long view approach. You had mentioned that there were some approaches in the last 20 years that you've seen that are making a difference. Can you share, whether it's at your firm or just within the organization at NBA as a whole, what approaches are working where we really need to continue to double down?
Okay. Well, I think corporations and I think leaders and the affinity bar as well as other bars are really trying to make a connection between the folks that actually have business opportunities and the folks that need business opportunities. Because if you get the opportunities, the experience and training will come and you can build a successful, thriving practice. And then if you happen to be a diverse lawyer, this is not automatic, but more than not, you would tend to want to hire or champion or mentor other diverse lawyers. Or in some of the diverse lawyers who are extremely successful will want to see their law firms and their corporations be more diverse. And so there are programs that are trying to develop more success stories and sort of put the demands for legal services in the hands of minorities, or at least the opportunities before minorities so they can, or diverse people rather, people of color, so that they can actually compete for the opportunities. So more of that is happening in many different ways, be it on the professional organizational side, trying to foster that. It's really being fostered within various law firms as well, and corporations are making a point of it. So that's one piece. There are organizations like LCLD, I think it's Leadership Council for Legal Diversity, that have been established by corporate law department leaders that focus in on professional and holistic training of lawyers so that they're prepared for opportunities. My father-in-law used to always say, luck is just preparedness and opportunity. And so the more prepared lawyers are for opportunity, then they can capitalize on it and also see it. So awareness programs are also important so people can kind of say, wait a minute, there is a real opportunity here, in helping people see that they can become a general counsel if they so choose, or a law firm partner if they so choose, or to lead a legal institution. Those are the kind of programs that I think are more effective, that kind of pull back the curtain and share real talk as to how people have arrived and what you need to do to maintain your current legal opportunity that you may have and increase your chances of getting significantly more. So those are the more effective programs. And then your leadership at the top saying, wait a second, we can solve this problem, of a lack of diversity, and challenging themselves and educating themselves on maybe what the source of some of the issues are, and then leveraging the best and brightest in their organizations to help them, tackle the problem. And so those are the things that I don't know if I've given too much at a high level for you, but those are the things that are sort of moving the needle in the legal profession right now, to the extent the needles move.
Well, that's great. And yes, shout out to LCLD. Joe and I were actually fellows together. So if your organization is not a member, you should be. Let me ask you this. Do organizations come to you? Do law firms and in-house, are they coming to the NBA to say, tell us where your pain points are, tell us how we can offer better programs like you were discussing?
Well, yes and no. I think they do come to us. I think they partner with us. I think they learn from that partnership. So in that way, yes. On occasion, I'm relatively 30 to 40 days in my role as president of the National Bar Association. But, law firms do want to hear from the National Bar Association. I think that they should leverage that opportunity even more so. But I had breakfast with a senior partner this morning, and we talked about me coming in and speaking to lawyers at her firm. And she talked about how she wanted to see, and is a proponent at the highest of levels at her firm, to ensure that the lawyers are actively engaged in the Bar Association, not just active, but seeking out leadership opportunities within the organization, because she feels that it will make them better lawyers within her organization. So there's just a small sliver to answer your question, but the answer is yes. I think that needs to be ramped up.
So for those listening, some are, they're in administration in law firms. Others are attorneys who, might have the chairman or someone else's ear, or chairwoman. What should they be doing if they are going to use NBA as a resource and really listen to what you have to say, because you have a ton of knowledge and experience and access to members? How should they reach out? How should they come to the organization to really be better integrated?
Well, I've come to the realization that, touches matter. And so with any organization, multiple touches breeds familiarity, and it really helps you understand what's being conveyed by the organization and how the organization works. So what I'm sharing with folks is just join us for a year. Come, and I don't mean join as a member, but I mean come to our signature programs, engage us at every level, and then determine what you like of our offerings, and to send different lawyers in your organization to our offerings over the full course of 1 year. And then if we are a value add, stick with us. If we're not a value add, please share how we can be. But I won't be, I won't take offense if folks say not a value add. I'll move on. But I wholeheartedly believe that after spending that year with us, they're going to be partners for quite some time, if not a lifetime.
Well, let me ask you this. So let's say that you have an administrator or an attorney that's not African American. Obviously, they should be supporting financially and, with time, typical members to go and actually get the benefit. But do you recommend that others that don't necessarily fit within, your target member group to still, show up and participate and engage? Or is it really intended for African American attorneys?
No, we welcome all. We welcome all as members, but we definitely welcome the folks that you described to join us as well. I think it's more important because you'll get an opportunity to understand the obstacles that diverse folks may face, and you can help individuals sort of overcome those obstacles. You get an opportunity to meet many of the talented lawyers that we have as members and that we have as speakers on different topics. And so I think it would be helpful just to foster idea generation alone, and for those lawyers or administrators to connect a bit more with their lawyers, and also to be able to share with other lawyers in their organizations and who cross their paths, the value proposition that they see in the National Bar Association. Because the National Bar Association does affect change. It's difficult to quantify, but several of our members have become law firm partners. And it's a process where you can meet people that can invest in you, be you majority or be you a person of color. And that's mission critical to create more successful lawyers, is just having more resources and be the mentors, colleagues, or acquaintances that are diverse.
So let's go ahead and put out there what are your next events where people can show up? If you've never attended an NBA event before, where it's a great place to just go and get resources, but also just listen and learn, especially if you're an ally, what are your upcoming events that listeners can attend?
Well, I'm going to focus on our first event coming up. We just left the Congressional Black Caucus, which is a fantastic event. And we're going to next have our Wally Branton Symposium. So Wally Branton is a civil rights hero, was a former dean of the Howard Law School, and we have a symposium in his name to sort of honor him. And it focuses on civil rights, the symposium, in our community to a certain extent. But we're going to host it at Facebook on November 9th, Friday, November 9th. We're going to have a reception at eBay on November 8th, and we may have a lunch and learn treat. Stay tuned on November 8th as well. And that is going to be a fantastic event. We're going to focus in on how artificial intelligence and social media play a role in civil rights. But we're also going to drill down on, because it's important for us to continually talk about this, making a difference and being courageous as legal organization leaders. And so I'm talking about the heads of law firms, the heads of corporations, senior partners. And that is a panel amongst the things we're going to learn about social media and AI, because I think all lawyers need to understand the intricacies of that generally, and as they may relate to civil rights, which is a very broad umbrella of topics. But this piece where we bring out law department leaders and senior partners and corporate law department leaders to talk about real actions around championing diversity and being courageous, I'm most excited about that.
That sounds awesome. And I'm having my own event those days, which I'm like, I can't reschedule that, but that sounds amazing. For those that are available, I highly encourage you check that out and sign up. All right, so let's talk about allies a little bit more, since this is kind of ally conversations. When you mentioned listening, and I think this is one that we often get wrong. I know it's one that I don't do well enough, which is to not just talk, but to listen. So where do you see allies of the African American community getting it wrong? So we say we're supportive, but maybe in the workplace, maybe in law firms, we're not actually doing something that's helpful, whether it is something that is an action or something that is an inaction.
Well, I think that the inclusive piece is one that I think is misunderstood, and that's the inclusive aspect of diversity and inclusion. And I think that our allies, at least historically, members of the National Bar Association, really sort of attempt to become true partners or champions of diverse lawyers. And I almost say, let me be responsible for the development and shaping of this lawyer's career. And it doesn't have to be, every single year, but if a seasoned lawyer kind of put that commitment into even a colleague, it doesn't have to necessarily be someone with a junior relationship, but just make that commitment, I think it'll go a long way. And I think sometimes people don't understand the level of commitment that you have to make to truly invest in someone's career. It's not a cursory positive touch here or there. That's not enough to sort of help someone succeed who doesn't have necessarily the same opportunities. There's been a lot of work around implicit bias. And so it's a reality in the workplace. And so if you're trying to overcome an implicit bias, it takes a huge investment. And I don't know if I think several people likely believe that their light investments are enough. And I think the statistics that you talked about earlier prove that they're not.
So what would be some examples of what true commitment looks like? Obviously, time is one. I have some of my own thoughts, but I want to hear yours. What would that look like? How can someone be responsible for and truly commit to making sure that other African American attorneys are successful?
Right. Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, I'll use Microsoft. Microsoft, they hire all types of attorneys, right, from all different backgrounds. But, they're not afraid to allow lawyers an opportunity to lead their cases, diverse lawyers, an opportunity to take their first major argument. I mean, that's the kind of commitment that we need and I'll transition it from, say, a corporate person like a Walmart or a Microsoft or a Toyota, where I've seen them time and time again give opportunities to folks, and move it into the law firm space. If you're a trial lawyer, investing in someone, putting them on the trial team, right? And not just allowing them to move up the ranks to where they're arguing motions, but give them a cross-examination opportunity. I mean, if I didn't get an opportunity, I committed a lot of my career to doing trial work without question, but I got an opportunity to actually take half the witnesses in a trial. And then the clients gave me the opportunity to do closing arguments. But for that opportunity, I'm not sure you would be speaking to Joe Drayton, law firm partner at Cooley LLP. So you have to give people those opportunities. You have to make those investments, and you have to kind of come out of your comfort zone and overcome what may be an uncomfortable start or an uneasy start, just because you may have differences of, just there may not be the requisite amount of affinities and get comfortable. And as long as the quality of work is where it needs to be, help individuals naturally evolve into skill sets that, if developed, could blossom. And so that's the kind of commitment that's necessary if we're going to change the game a little bit and really see our workforce become, in the legal profession anyway, more diverse.
Well, let's talk quickly, and then we'll wrap up, about qualities and implicit bias, because I'm sure you're familiar with the study that Erin Reeves and her company, I believe it's Nexian, what they did, which in this probably came out 5 years ago. But it was the study where it was a writing sample, and the only thing that was changed was the description of the associate. So it was, and I'm making this up because I don't remember the exact details, but it would be like John Smith. And it was exactly the same for both, except one said a Caucasian male associate and the other said African American male associate. And the studies came back that when that description was on there, they found more errors, and they said they needed a lot more work, that it just wasn't, it was subpar. So let's say that you think you're an ally, but you start working with an associate and you're like, well, their work's just not up to par. It's not quality work. Well, it could be there's an implicit bias there that you're not even recognizing. So let's say you're an ally, you think someone doesn't do quality work. Wouldn't you say there's still, there's an opportunity there to be committed, and what that might look like?
Well, it's definitely an opportunity to be committed. I mean, I think the opportunity there to be committed is to say, well, wait a second, let me see if I can help this individual improve. Because in the Erin Reeves study, and she did a fantastic job with that study, both lawyers needed improvement. It was just one lawyer, because of the areas of improvement, which were exactly the same, should have been on his way out of the firm. I think they were two male names. Yep. And then the other lawyer had promise. So I would just say, let's take a step back. Let's evaluate if there's anything that is the error just so unforgivable. If it's not unforgivable, we should challenge ourselves to come up with a plan to invest in the lawyer to overcome these areas of improvement, and maybe give ourselves, say, let me reflect on this a little bit more. But those are the types of things I would encourage individuals to do, is to say, don't cast judgment too quickly, make a few investments, determine if an individual actually improves after you make the investments, and then constantly assess the potential of that individual. and talk to some other people about the individual, maybe without necessarily naming who the individual is, to get greater perspective. Because sometimes our perspective alone is an implicitly biased perspective. And when we talk to others, we can even revise our view of the world.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on here. I could talk to you for hours, but I promised you just 30 minutes. So I know you are so busy with being a partner in your own caseload, as well as being the president of the National Bar this year. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and have this discussion.
Well, I want to say thank you to you. Thank you for actually having this podcast and doing this work. I really appreciated the opportunity, and I could speak to you for another 5 hours. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did, and that you look forward to getting to know more of the affinity groups that we have in the country. And I was really inspired by that. And I'm now thinking of how can I get to an NBA event. So for those of you interested in doing the same, we are going to put in the show notes the website for NBA, which will also give you access to their events. So the way that you get to the show notes is hustleandflowpodcast.com/86. And I also invite you to come join us in a further conversation with Joe and the National Bar Association in our new LinkedIn group. So the LinkedIn group is called All Rise. You can find it by going to heatherjoyhubbard.com/LinkedIn. You can request to become a member and we will let you in. And the National Bar Association, they are basically taking over our LinkedIn group all week long. And they're going to be sharing even more information about their organization and how you can not only get involved, but really learn more from their members and from their institutional knowledge. So come join us in the group and let's continue the conversation. Have a great week, and I will see you next week. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.